The Origins of the English Language, Part 2. The pre-English settlers of the British Isles, mainly the Celts, didn't actually leave very much vocabulary behind that we still use in modern English. The vocabulary that they left behind mostly relates to geography. Words such as Thames, the name for the famous river in London, and it comes from the Celtic word for flow, because the water flows. Simple as that. We also have Avon, like Stratford upon Avon, where Shakespeare comes from, and Avon just means river. Then we come to Old English. This is what we call the language that came from the merging of the Saxons, the Jutes, the Angles, and all the kingdoms of England, Northumbria, Wessex, etc. And the vocabulary that survives to us from Old English is most of our functional vocabulary. Words like house, sleep, drink, eat, and all of our irregular plurals, man, men, woman, women, one fish, two fish, one sheep, two sheep, one deer, two deer, tooth, teeth, foot, feet, etc. So irregular plurals which don't have s at the end, child, children, etc. These all come from Old English. Because Old Norse and Old English are both Germanic languages from the same region, they have a lot of very similar vocabulary. So very often the Vikings just gave us a word which we already had, but with a slightly different pronunciation. Examples would be skirt in Old Norse and shirt in Old English, scatter versus shatter. Anything with the sk sound, the sk sound, is very Norse. So words like skill, skin, and sky all come from Old Norse. A lot of very common words come from Old Norse. Words like gift, cake, egg, they, them, their, all come from Old Norse through the Vikings. Then we come to Anglo-Norman French. So this is after the invasion in 1066 from the Normans. They bring with them a lot of Old French mixed with Old Norse. Interestingly, this is where we have a lot of difference between high society and low society. The Norman rulers were the king and aristocrats, and the English people were largely farmers. So the language spoken in the castles was Old French, but the language spoken by the English people was Old English. So there wasn't a very big merge between French and English, but we did take a lot of vocabulary. When we talk about the Old English or the Saxons, we can call it field vocabulary because they were mostly farmers. And for the French rulers living in the castles, we would talk about table vocabulary. In Old English, they would talk about cow as the animal and also as the meat. In French, they make the difference between the animal and the meat. So we took the French word bœuf, changed it to beef over time. Same for pig and pork, comes from the French, pork. Sheep, the animal, and mutton, the meat. Mutton coming from the French mouton, which is a sheep. You'll notice that we didn't take the French word for chicken. Chicken describes the animal and the meat. Same for fish. Fish describes the animal and the meat. The French word for chicken, the meat, is poulet, which we took actually as poultry to talk about the group. Unsurprisingly, we do have a lot of vocabulary coming from royal power in England from the Norman French. Words like parliament, government, liberty, banquet. We also have many words from Old French which in Old French had an S and in modern French do not have S. In English we kept the S. Words like forest, we can see is exactly the same. Quest, hospital, hostel. Usually in modern French we delete the S and we add a circumflex above the O to indicate that there used to be an S. Very often in English we just keep the S from Old French. Then we come to the Romans. Of course, the Romans were in England a long time before the Normans, but we did say in part 1 that we didn't take a lot of Latin from the Roman Empire. The Latin that we have in English actually arrived more during the Renaissance. We took quite a lot of Latin and quite a lot of Greek, Old Greek. As science and technology boomed during the Renaissance, English lacked the vocabulary for very complex ideas. So we borrowed thousands of words from Latin and Greek during the Renaissance. Words like adapt, biology, skeleton, atmosphere, chaos, and encyclopedia. The Renaissance is really the last time we had a big influx of vocabulary come into the English language. But of course we do have many words in modern English which come from other languages. So the language is always evolving.